Alright, welcome back. Kind of a quick update on the Skymaster F22. Haven't done much in the last couple days. It got cold again, and the shop, as you can see, is unfinished. It gets kind of chilly out here. But I decided to come out today. I got a cup of coffee, coat on, hands are cold, but I'm going to kind of go over the elevators, the issue I ran into, which is not really an issue, it's just a fuck up. I can't say that. A mess up on my part. Before I move on to the rudder. The rudder, you have to take the tail off, and the servo goes in from the inside of the actual fuselage, and the shaft, output shaft on the servo sticks up and has like a little ball on it that kind of like a direct drive for the bottom of the rudder. So you don't have to disconnect anything when you take the rudder off. I will have a light on the rudder, top of the rudder, facing aft, so there will be a two pin wire that disconnects when I take the rudders off, because it'll have to take the rudder off, you know, because I got this one because the gear stays on the aircraft, so I can just roll it up in the trailer, but the rudder will have to come off. So but it's just a two wire just for the light that I'm going to put there, the LED. But to show you the rudder or the elevators, and kind of like, let me flip this around, and my goof up. So they don't really have instructions for these. They'll take some pictures, or maybe have somebody they sell one to kind of like put, you know, some tips and just take pictures of their build. And I think I looked at it wrong, because the pictures are hard. You can't, you know, the manuals that you, like I said, it's not really a manual in my opinion. Excuse me. And the pictures were hard, and looking at it on my phone, I think I looked at the wrong, I just looked at it wrong. And what I had done originally, I had put the servo, and it's kind of hard to, let me get my light here. It's kind of hard to see it, but the servo originally, if you look back at the other pictures, the servo was, the bottom was facing in. So it looked, I had originally put them in like this. So that's what I thought. And if I would have just did my logical thinking on it, and, you know, like, hey, it's always better to have, you know, with a long control surface, you know, the closer you can get the, you know, the control horn to the center, just the better off, you know, that way, because if it's at this very end, you know, flexing, but these really won't flex. But so I didn't even think about that, and I installed the servos like this, and ended up cutting the servo horn, or the servo arm hatch, and the actual flap, or the control horn, in the wrong spot. So you can see, so the servo was on this side and like this, and I cut everything wrong. So a big goof, never really done that before. That's a first, to cut something wrong. I usually catch it before I cut, but not a huge deal. What kicked me off was I cut this one, I had the arm in, and then I was going ahead and I'd drawn everything, measured, and cut the two, you know, because it's double arm, and there was no wood block, and I was like, oh crap, they didn't put a wood block. And I was like, crap. I'm like, that just doesn't seem right. So I just went back and looked at the pictures and realized what I had done. So flip the servo over, the screws go in from the bottom to hold it in against the bulkhead, cut the new slit, and then I cut new openings for the control horn, and lo and behold, there's wood there. It's balsa, very, very thin and almost worthless, but it's something to glue to, and I really need to put some harder wood. You know, I guess it works. I mean, I know the fuselage, and you know, you're tying the top and the bottom, you know, in there, and it works. You know, it keeps the weight down, but I would rather see like a harder wood block. And that's kind of my complaint too, is all these ribs in here, you know, past this is just I don't know what you call it. It's the green, like foam board stuff that you do and that you see people do layups. They usually laminate it with something. They've built the ribs and the spars and stuff in here with that, without any reinforcement. So I don't, it saves weight obviously, and the load bearing parts, are the carbon tubes, and they do have some carbon fiber, in the skin. I don't know how far it goes out, but this is a wood bulkhead that's right here. But they use that soft wood. It's not like what I consider aircraft ply. It's light ply. It's the same stuff they make their equipment trays out of. And you drill the holes for the servos screws. You put the servo screws in, and if you don't put any CA in there, thin CA, they are very soft, and you can literally strip a screw if you're not careful. So if at a minimum, I would recommend putting some CA in there. At times, I've glued ply blocks on the backside, and if I was using a traditional servo screw, I probably would have done that on this, just to help reinforce it, because don't want to get a loose servo, cause any kind of flutter. But since I'm using these thicker screws, I thought it would be okay, especially after I put the CA in there and I put them back in. I really tightened them down. They didn't strip or anything. So anyways, but back to this. Like I said, total goof on my part. I didn't use their clevises, because they use, and I already talked about this before, they use a metal ball with a bearing and then the typical Sullivan Y clevis. And you have to have it perfect, because there's no way to get slop like you can on an actual ball. This doesn't have a ball. It's just a bearing. So when you use that on here, it's going to bind. I don't know how you could, because it says in the little thing that they get on their website, hey, make the control horn parallel to the hinge line. You don't do that on something that's swept back, because if you put it parallel to the hinge line, the clevis would be more like angled like this. Your servo would need to be over here working, to not bind up on that ball bearing. So you have to put it in like this angled, so it should technically be in line with your servo arm, which is the way I did it. But the thing about when you have a control horn on an angle, when it comes up and down, when you move up and down, this changes. The angle of this changes. So if you don't have a ball here that you can, like a swivel type control horn or a control ball end like that swivels, it's going to bind up. So I don't understand why they do that, but that's just them. I guess you can make it work if you don't really care, but in my opinion, that's the right way to do it. So I got to do some fixing, and I've kind of pondered how I want to do it. I'll probably take some cloths, a little piece of or carbon fiber with some high saw, mix it up, and just put a piece in here, and then fill it with some, just some light filler. And then I thought about just making, since I'm finally getting with the rest of the world and getting a 3D printer, which is on the way, I thought about printing or getting something like super thin, like maybe a millimeter thin, and just kind of make just something like a cover here and here, and then put one on this side, even though I didn't cut it. This side's right. I did this side right. Just put something over here just to make it match, just for looks. Because I'm not OCD, but I'm borderline, I guess, and just knowing it's there drives me nuts, and knowing I did that drives me nuts. So, but yeah, so I thought about just putting a little clear, something like the thickness of that, just to make it, and maybe finding, see if I can find this color, kind of glittery blue, which is probably something that you would see on a car. So I'm going to check the car section of the hobby shop. Which reminds me, that's what I was going to do today. Crap. Oh, well, maybe I'll run over there after this. and just paint it to match. You know, could leave it open. Oh yeah, look, it's a servo, vent, whatever. But no, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to cover it and put the same thing on this side just to make it look good. But the only thing I still have to do, I do have to trim this a little bit. Right there where it hits, and then of course on the back side where it hits a little bit. That's the only thing, kind of the negative of using a ball instead of a clevis, because the clevis is usually in line, so you get a much smaller cut here. But like I said, I just don't see a way to make a clevis, and I can't ever find metal servo arms that'll fit a clevis. I mean, technically, the clevis is made for a plastic type servo arm, and maybe you can use it on these carbon, and I'll probably use it on the leading edge, or I'm sorry, on the flaps. But it's hard to get anything that will work with a clevis for a servo arm. Everything's usually bigger. So, anyways, but that's my personal preference. I did use a much shorter rod. When I went back and put this in and glued the horn in, I was able to use one of my rods, my titanium turnbuckles. So I got to screw those in just a little bit more to get, because at neutral, this is off a little bit, but that's just an adjustment once I finish cutting this. So. Yeah, other than that, that's my boo-boo. Don't do like I did. What is it? Measure twice, cut once. Well, I didn't look enough before I cut. So, but it's on the bottom. It's tucked up underneath there. You won't see it. It'll only be me that knows it's there. So a lot of people wouldn't even care. But anyways, that's my goof. Hinge lines are pretty tight. There's, I think, a little bit of play, but that's just the gear mesh. So I was actually happy about their wires. The wires are really tight, which is good. Didn't have to go through and fill them with high saw and kind of resize them like normal. So thumbs up there. So. Alright, so that's it. You guys have a good one. I'll get to the rudder, and that'll be the next videos on the rudder. Probably won't do that today just because it's so cold out here, but I wanted to show you this goof because of all the other pictures I've taken showing it the other way. So don't put it in the other way. Put it in with the bottom of the servo facing the fuselage and the output shaft facing out. So there you go. You guys have a good one.